Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a Q&A video, which is a little bit strange because I kind of told myself that I wasn't going to do these unless I got to some big milestone or something, because it feels kind of weird that people would want to ask me questions, at least personally for me. But I need to make some content because I'm on vacation right now, as I've said in many videos, and I thought this would be a cool way to make a video that doesn't have to do with the weekly schedule of War of the Visions, because I am not able to do the weekly content right now. And that's kind of the tricky part about covering gacha games, is that if you're not able to get the news and get the information, then you can't make should you polls and all that kind of stuff. You can't do it ahead of time. I mean, you could, but you're guessing, and then you have to either release the video or not. So here's the Q&A. Let's get into some questions. The first question comes from Turima99, who asks, with antlers being limited to an extent in War of the Visions, how many elements do you think a current player should be focusing on? Tying into that, what made you decide to focus on fire on my account? That's a great question. I think that given the amount that free-to-play can acquire, depending on how many teams or varieties of team you want to build, you can safely build into 2 to 3 elements, and that would cover quite a few units. Now, it also kind of depends on how many units are coming out in the elements that you're playing, because if there's lots, then you have to always keep a couple of antlers banked just in case you don't get them and you don't get stuck without being able to 140 a unit, because while the old units were not made with the 140s in mind, the new units pretty much were. So a lot of times that's a huge piece of how they operate. So you definitely want to keep a few in stock just in case. But for my account, for example, I'm safely building fire, lightning, and earth, and I even dipped into light a little bit for limited guild battle, but that was just for Jaden. So and I didn't do any other light UR units. And at this point, I'm really just working on URs. I haven't done very many MRs, SRs, and etc. because I just haven't had a need to yet. So I'm gonna wait on those and see kind of what I'm interested in, and one more, get their upgrades, which ones I'd be kind of wanting to do. But otherwise, I think, yeah, if you go 2, you're definitely safe. 3, you have to just be a little bit more stringent with how you spend them. But I think that's a good policy. In terms of fire, I wasn't always focused on fire. Like, there was a time where I was using a lot of earth units. There was a time where I was maybe more into light. There were a couple of hallmark pulls, though, that kind of pushed me into the direction. So, for example, Delita was a huge favorite of mine for a very long time. I loved using him. And then after that, at a certain point, Raldor came out, and I absolutely loved using Raldor. And then King Mont was a big target of mine, and I just loved this big, beefy physical tank with all these new ways at the time, elemental resistance and stuff to kind of survive damage. And I went in on him, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I do like the fire units in particular. Like, there's so many units that I think are very, very cool. Like Satya, for example, Hio is one of my favorites. I love Roy and Kefka. I'm using them a ton. And so I think just at a certain, I kind of accidentally fumbled into that area, but then I very much found myself looking at the upcoming units and really liking the fire units. Although, if I could pull everybody, that would be great, but it's just not the, not the way that I play gacha games. And obviously I don't spend, much or money at all right now. So that's part of it too. The next question comes from P4 Ultimax 133, and it says, with characters like Reagan and Sakura having multi-element attacks, do you foresee a day where we have multi-element units available to us, like a water-earth character, or maybe an element-less character, so no element, or just like we have the handful of non-aspected espers in the game? So this is a cool question. It's hard to figure out because you would have to figure out what are their weaknesses and strengths, because all of a sudden you're bringing in, would they just have multiple elemental strengths and multiple elemental weaknesses? And if it was an unaspected character, that might actually be too strong in that they don't have that elemental check. Of course, light and dark are kind of similar to that, but at least they do have an elemental weakness, and there is an innate multiplier in this game that we'll talk about in just a second here. But I think it would be really tricky. Of course, they don't benefit from things like fire attack up, and if they have no element. The other side of that, though, is that all of a sudden any character that kind of depends on elemental resistance up is, or just building element resistance, if you're building a character that is this non-typed, I think they would be too powerful. I think that might actually kind of break the game a little bit in terms of one key way, which we don't have a lot of access to it, but when you can build a high elemental resistance, it feels really good. And I don't think they want to mess with that. So I guess the answer is maybe. It would really have to be closely worked in terms of balance to make sure it's fair, but I think that would be very cool to see like a 2-element character at some point. Something that we might see is a character that can switch elements. Either it's in battle or it's something that we do to them out of battle. Like, for example, if we had like a Lucio, that we could select which element he was going to be, so he could help out whichever element our account needed. That could be kind of cool. Maybe if they don't want people switching them too much, there's a currency associated with it. Of course they would do that. You know, it'd be like a paid currency, but that would be a neat way to make a cool customizable character. Next up is Quietly Chattering, who asks, what do you teach in school? And then share one memorable experience I had as a teacher. So I started my teaching career as a science and PE teacher. I then moved into a bit of math teaching, as most science teachers do. I quickly left PE behind. It's a pretty wanted position, and I didn't really want to mess with the dynamic that we had going on at the school. But then I completed my inclusive education degree, and I am now a full-time learning services teacher. So I work in a learning support classroom, and I help students that have learning disabilities or other challenges that are affecting their learning. And that's kind of my role within the school, which is a big kind of paperwork type role. I was also the athletic director for 4 years. I am no longer the athletic director, and it's absolutely massive change in my life. I have so much more free time than I used to. And as for a very memorable experience, it goes all the way back to the first year I was teaching, and I was still a PE teacher. And at the end of the year, all the kids are doing their promposals, and I get noticed from a kid that like something dangerous is happening in the gym. And I run in there, and there is a kid up in the rafters, like way up in the rafters of the gym, and he is doing the upside down Spider-Man hang to his girlfriend to prom-pose to go to the prom with her, like from the Spider-Man 1, Tobey Maguire, like descending, lifting the mask and doing the kiss with Mary Jane. Like, it was insane. It was so dangerous. He could have died. But it was an absolutely epic promposal. He was in a Spider-Man costume. And what's kind of funny is I play soccer with that guy now, because on my soccer team, we've been recruiting like these young guns to come help us out. And there's now people on the team that I never taught, but I did know they were in the school as students when I started teaching. The next question is from Kitty Law 777. Who says, I don't know if you've answered this before in previous videos, but I'll ask anyway, which FFBE units do you anticipate being released in War? The Division says limited units. So very specifically limited units. And I think that those are going to be the global exclusive units from FFBE, which there are quite a few. They come out way more commonly in FFBE, like once a month, we get a global exclusive unit over in that game. So there's literally maybe even not 100, but there's so many. Like there's a ton. We could get like any number of them, and some really popular ones. I am going to make a video about this, so I won't go into full detail. But for example, Sky is one that I think is really cool. I think you can go look them up on the FFBE wiki. I think Wilk would be really cool. Malphasy is one that people are super into. There's a lot of interesting ones like Ling. There's also Roberta, which is the Dragoon that we kind of thought maybe would be coming at some point. But I'll take this moment to say there's also some non-limited characters that are like FFBE main characters that we haven't gotten yet that I would be pretty pumped for. So Nickel would be a very cool character. He uses a book and he's kind of a tactician. He would be a water element character. And then there would be Axstar, who is a katana user. He trained Lastwell, kind of. I won't get into spoilers, but he was kind of like Lastwell's trainer in the second season. And he would be an ice element unit. Very, very cool. Both male characters though, so I know that we don't get those as commonly, but I would love to see those come out. But they are story characters, so they would be like Rain and Fina and Lastwell and stuff, where they would be non-limited in the game. Next, we have Chase VSol 694, who asks 4 questions, but I will answer them because they're not too long of questions. So first of all, how does agility affect CT? You can get technical. So how it works works is you take your agility from your unit and you divide it by 10. And every tick, that is how much your CT increases by. So if you have 90 agility, every tick it goes up, your CT goes up by 9. When it gets to 100, then you take your turn. If 2 units on the same tick get to 100, the unit with the highest agility will go first. So there is a reason to have a high agility, even though it kind of rounds at a certain point, because let's say your agility is at 92, it's going to round to 9 CT that goes up when you get your next turn. So it is really important to build agility. You've seen people that can kind of accumulate it so fast that they can actually lap people. And you can see how important that is with people like Bradley, who have high agility, but also have CT up. And all of a sudden they're getting essentially what is 2 ticks worth of agility in one action. So then when the next tick happens, they're 3 ticks ahead. And that's why you see Bradley jumping ahead of units when he's built with a super high agility in like a mono earth team where you can benefit from multiple agility cards quite easily. So which unit would work better as a tank, max reincarnated Muraga or single reincarnated Dialdo? It would be Dialdo because he just has so many more mitigation factors than Muraga has. Muraga would be doing way more damage, way more damage, and you would have way more HP. But at the end of the day, he's just not going to have all the stuff on his kit that Dialdo has, the the debuff weakening effect, some of the resistances that Dialdo has, and more. So that's kind of, it's still going to be Dialdo. What would it take for me to spend in War of the Visions again? Probably a really big collab. The last time I spent was on a collab, and I guess around the anniversary for the FF7 remake. And before that, I hadn't spent in like a year or something. It was a long time. But even when I started the game, like, I wasn't buying a weekly pack. I was just buying the monthly pack every month. And then on collabs like Final Fantasy IV, I was buying some Visior, but I was never spending an incredible amount or an incredible pace. I used to do the daily buy, the 60 Viz for the bonuses whenever I pulled a unit. So I would do that. Like that would be something like $10 a week. But I wasn't pulling every week. So it wasn't even that common that I was doing that. But those have kind of become worse than they used to be. They used to be pretty good. And what game could be created that would be my next War of the Visions? That's a really good question. There would be a few. So for example, if a really cool Gundam gacha ever came out that was turn-based or like strategy-based, I would be very heavily into it, and it would have to really suck for me not to play it further. Another game that I would go all in, and maybe there's a hope of it because we have some remasters coming, would be a Suikoden gacha game. Now I think some people call it Suikoden or whatever. I don't know how it's pronounced. I'm just saying the way that I said it as a child. But that game, if you haven't played those games, first of all, go do that. Second of all, the premise of those games is that you can recruit up to 101 characters, and a lot of them have stories and stuff, and it's very cool. What that means is that there's 5 Suikoden games plus Suikoden Tactics, then the DS game, Terrakiris or whatever it was. There's so many characters that they could put in to a gacha game, and they're all really cool. It's an RPG. I think if they use the original kind of like sprite concept, that it would be like a really cool sprite based game. I would just be so pumped for that. That would be one that I would jump into and like make content for if it came out. Then we have Chris Rocks, who says, do you think this game is still fun with top guilds putting all single element defense walls with the exact same 3 units times 30? Are there some guilds who copies another guild's wall just because they lost to that wall, and suddenly top 5 guilds are fielding the same 3 units? And do you think they're going to will be a time where the top guilds will stop using the 3 units as a wall? The game is still fun for me because I play in the top 50 and I do not run into walls. So I've almost never come into walls. Maybe a few times a guild is doing it, and definitely in limited guilds battle, it might be a little bit more common because it's easier to build like an MR, wall that people can all build up. But at the end of the day, I am not very experienced with fighting walls, and so that is definitely something that I can't comment on fully. However, I will say that I don't like the concepts of walls, and if I was facing wall after wall after wall, I know I would get frustrated, I would get annoyed with it, and I probably wouldn't want to play against that every day. And I would probably try to get into a guild battle tier where I would actually be fighting varied teams, because that's super fun to kind of see what people are cooking up and what comes of it. I don't think that the top is ever going to change unless it just becomes like the whole game becomes casual, and at that point the game's ending. So, you know, it's a good sign that there's this top end, because they really enjoy what they're doing. They do a lot of testing, and it's a really big collaborative effort, so you can't really knock that for them. But at the same time, I'm just really not into that, and if I ever had to make a wall, I would not be in the guild that I am. I've been in my guild since launch. I'm actually one of 2 people of the 30 that have been in there since launch, and everybody else has come in as a recruit at some point. So it would be very sad to leave my guild, but thankfully my guild is at the perfect balance of competitive but also fun and teamwork, and those things coming together in a way where we strive to do our best, but we're never trying to infringe on the way that people play the game. So if you guys know me, you know that I hate putting out long videos. So I am going to go ahead and cut this one off here, because I just went in to edit it and I was at 32 minutes, which is way too long and daunting for people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this one here. I'll put timestamps in so people can look for the questions they like. I'll put it up, and then I'll put a part 2 up with another 15 minutes of questions for people to enjoy. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon in another video.